got Sean Burks with the Audubon Wheelers here with us this morning. First of all, Sean, thanks for driving up. Appreciate it this morning. You had no idea we're going to be on camera, by the way. So
yeah, you mentioned radio. You didn't mention video. So
It's kind of early for a teacher. Is this early for a teacher in summer?
No, we do weight room 4 mornings a week. So
Okay.
I was up and moving, and I was already coming up to Breda to golf today anyway, so it worked out well.
Oh, so we're just a little in-between stop on the way up at the golf course.
Yeah, I mean, it pushed my tee off time a little bit, but, I'll make it work for you guys.
Wow, the sacrifices you make, Sean, are incredible.
I will say this. Jeff and I were down golfing in the Audubon the Audubon Booster Club tournament on Saturday. Sean needs all the extra rounds he can get.
He's not lying.
You hit somebody, didn't you?
Yeah, I didn't. Someone in the group did.
You got blamed for it.
And we will got to say this. There was a young lady that was working one of the tees, Olivia Clucky, and she was helping Molly Lang tell us about what we could win and what we could do. It was a roll the dice game, and all of a sudden she took a shot right in the back off of a drive, and she didn't even flinch. So you got to give a shout out and a kudos to her. All you saw was the ball bounce away from her, and you're like, did you just get hit?
Although if she wouldn't have been there, that ball probably would have made the green.
Yeah.
We're wrong, Green. No offense. I can't hit it that far, so I know it wasn't me.
Yeah, next thing you know, Sean comes pulling up on his golf cart. Is there a ball around here somewhere?
I wish I could say I hit it that far, but it was not me. But.
Yeah, I want to thank you. What a great event that was, and we had a ball down there with all the coaches, and shout out to our group. That was a fun day, and boy, I'm glad you invited us down there. We had a lot of fun.
Thanks for coming. We're always looking for suggestions. We're always looking for new teams, but more than anything, it's just a good way to, kind of brag about what we're doing down there and get that support. A lot of local businesses sponsor it. Glad to have a few out-of-towners to kind of see some of those things. And we try to pair up people who we think are gonna get along with other people or similar golfing ability or whatever. And it sounds like the group you paired with you might have golfed a little bit better, but the social aspect sounded like it was a good time.
Yeah, well, they're shooting 14 under. We're not in that class.
Well, and if they wouldn't have had Monty on the tee, Monty Rebuff, they'd have shot much better. But, he kind of drunk them down just
now,
John,
this is a new one for us. And I'm not going to call the guy out, but there was actually a ball, a tee, and a driver left on the tee blocks. I've seen clubs left before, but never a driver on the block. It was a roll of dice game. He'd put his stuff up there. So we won't tease him until volleyball season. But Mr. Subert, you left your club there.
When you golf with Monty all day, you probably don't need a driver. So you probably didn't notice it for a couple holes as far as Monty hits.
Luckily, it was the lady back on the tee box that recognized it, and she pulled the ball in the club and everything and took it up.
Never seen a ball, a tee, and a club left on the block before.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, we're talking football today because we've gotten around to that so well. It's like herding cats in this studio, literally trying to get them to focus on one subject. Let's talk football, Sean. Of course, practice is underway. You've got a program right now that's been on a roll lately.
Yeah, last year was a 6-3 season, which was a down year. Missed the playoffs for the first time, so. When you look back and reflect on 6-3 being a down year says a lot about where we're at. The kids are really hungry and motivated to get back on that track. So we're excited. We have a week 0 game, so everything's ratcheted up a little bit. So we're actually in our second week of practice already. It's going to be school time before we know it. First day of school is the first game. We're excited to kick off a week 0 game with East Mills, but we got a lot of work to do before we get there.
I was going to say, you're coming up this Friday night, right?
No.
I'm sorry, next one.
Yep.
Friday the 23rd, we have our kickoff. It was supposed to be our scrimmage and our kind of a walkthrough practice, but now it's a real game and it's go time. So it's trying to get everybody on that same page with our concessions and everything else to get everybody ready for week 1. Mm-hmm. As typical first-year AD me decided to bump up a game on everybody, so we're trying to get everything ready, but a lot of really good people stepping up to take care of that, and we'll be ready.
So 6-3 is something that a lot of teams out there would take. For you guys, it was a down year. What has been the talk in the offseason among the players themselves? Because you're looking for the players to turn that around. I mean, you want their attitude to be, hey, that's not good enough for us.
Yeah, we put a few new wrinkles in offensively, and just thinking about how we became a little too predictable at the end of the year. So we put a lot of new stuff in, and hopefully those wrinkles will help us out to be added in. And just the players buying in the weight room all summer. And most of our guys, I'm extremely proud to say, are multi-sport kids. So they're competing all winter in basketball or wrestling. Most of them were out for track in the spring. A handful of them were out for golf. A couple out for tennis, and a lot of them were back out for baseball in a season. The guys were pretty young and figured out how to win. So, but winning in other sports really carries over, and we're excited to hopefully see some of that carry over this fall.
Sean, you mentioned here a moment ago adding the game with East Mills there in week 0. This is kind of becoming an epidemic around the state. There's 2 schools that Essex and Clarinda Academy that dropped their football program for this year. It really becomes a problem when it happens in that mid-district year. So this is the in-between years. You don't switch districts until after the season. So that's the reason why you guys picked it up. How big of a problem do you think that's getting to be around the state?
It's really big. It's a big problem in 8-man football because you can't go play anyone else. There's only so many teams to play. If a Class A team drops, you can go find 5 other classes to play, or 4 other classes, including in the 5th one, counting your own. But in 8-man, there's only 60-some teams to choose from, and most of our schedules are set, and it's tough. It's just a scheduling nightmare as far as logistics go. And then the other aspect of it is you've got teams that are looking to make sure they have the best chance at the playoffs with the RPI. Let's use Fremont Mills, for example. They couldn't find anybody in the state willing to play them. There were teams able to, open to, but it didn't sound like anybody in the state was willing to sign up to play Fremont Mills in either of their bye weeks or week 0. So they've had to go across state borders, it sounds like, to try to pick up a couple games in Nebraska. So, with just the way it is between the teams dropping out mid-cycle, teams trying to kind of pad their schedules or build their schedules a certain way, there's definitely some issues there.
Do you think the RPI has had the biggest effect on that, trying to find those extra games?
Well, maybe not. I think the biggest problem is there's only 60 teams to choose from, and most of us already have a game. A lot of people already have a week 0 game scheduled, whatever it might be. Let's just use the Fremont Mills example. They had a hole in their schedules weeks 3 and 4. Who out there is open in weeks 3 and 4? Right. Hardly anybody, if anybody. I don't even know off the top of my head. So it's one of those where it becomes really difficult to schedule, and then when you go to the week 0, there's several teams that are already scheduled week 0, and then you bring in the RPI factor of who's willing to play them, who's able to play them, because physically, if you're not prepared to play a team like Fremont Mills, it's going to do you damage for the rest of your season. You don't want 4 or 5 kids hurt. You don't want to start your season with a 60-point loss, and a lot of those teams were just not willing to start to try to schedule them.
Has there been any discussions about how this can be fixed, about any kind of a way to fix it? Because it's probably not completely fixable, because you never know when a team's going to say, we just don't have enough kids this year to play.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. A couple things that have kind of started to come to the front are a couple A schools. They're how they're going to handle those guys dropping down. There's going to be some A schools that can't field, maybe even 1A, but hopefully not. But if they can't field enough players at 11-man, but they're over the 8-man cutoff, they can drop to 8-man. But it sounds like they're going to make them do that at the beginning of the cycle, put them in a district, just not allow them to make the playoffs. So I don't think that's going to help either. So it's a really difficult situation that I don't know what the answer is right now.
As you're hearing, Martinsville St. Mary's has the same issue. There's a school that gets plenty of kids out for basketball, plenty of kids out for baseball, but they're struggling on football. I think they have 13 kids. There's a team that probably could drop down, but again, is that fair? They have more kids to choose from. It's not the same situation where you guys are in.
Yeah, they could choose to drop down to play 8-man. They just wouldn't be able to play in the playoffs. So it's one of those decisions you have to make. Do we drop down and play 8-man so that our kids can play with no end goal at the end of the season to have? So that's where it's a little bit tough. Grandview Christian, for example, is doing that this year. They're not fielding a varsity team, so what they're doing is, and they think they're going to drop down to 8-man, so they're actually our JV opener this year in 8-man. It's an 11-man school. They've decided to just play mainly an 8-man schedule, and they knew they couldn't do it at the varsity level, so they're not going to play on Friday nights. So they're trying to pick up teams on Mondays and Thursdays, et cetera. So there's a few of those out there, but as far as the problem of finding games for teams that have dropped the schedule, it's really tough unless the state's going to step up and say, okay, here's our teams, here's our new schedule. Some of you guys are going to have to change it up a little bit and dictate who plays who. You can't choose to not play Fremont. They're going to find someone for them. Or you can't choose to play Stanton or whatever it might be. You're going to have to play somebody. And that to me, that's the only solution, is that the state steps up and kind of almost not redistricts, but redoes some non-district games in the middle of cycles. But even that's not a great choice in my opinion. But what other choice do you have?
Coach, there's been discussions in the past about splitting 8-man into the larger schools and the smaller schools. Could that help this out some? So maybe a team that can maybe have 13 kids, out wouldn't feel like, well, we're such at a disadvantage if we're playing with somebody that's got 30, so let's just not play. But if we're playing only other schools that are around that 15 or 20 mark, we might be able to do that.
Yeah, the only problem that coaches, that we've talked about with that is where do you make the cutoff? Is if we're at 120 right now, do you bump that number to 140, and all of a sudden you have a bunch of A schools that are dropping down to 8-man, and if you do that, if you have some of those cross-district games, you're going to have some tiny schools in 8-man that are playing some schools that are way bigger, way more kids out. So that's competitively, physically, that's a little bit scary to do. Of how's that the right thing to do?
I can imagine the travel too. You get those little school districts. You don't want them driving 3-4 hours for a game
Right.
somewhere across the street.
Yeah,
that would make scheduling even extra difficult.
Exactly. If you take the 30 smallest schools across the state and you plug them on the map around the fringes of the state, and you're trying to make 4 districts out of those, I don't know. You just divide 80 and 35 into quadrants and go. I don't know what you do, but the travel
don't
would not
throw
be
that
great.
out as an idea, man. I may take you up on that.
Yeah, we the nice thing with Football Friday with playoffs and travel, at least they've gotten a little bit smarter about that with the RPI. We're playing on Friday nights to take the travel out of that a little bit, but even with districts on a Friday night, it's not a big deal. I guess unless you ask Coach Peterson or Weaver, he's driving to Lake Park and et cetera, and he's on the edge of a district, but at least it's not on Tuesday nights, varsity basketball or, some of those other sports. At least we have the Fridays that we can do that, and we're a 7 o'clock kick, and some of the bigger schools are still 7:30, so travel is not such a big deal where it was when we were playing the playoffs in the middle of the week. When Panorama was driving to Regina on a Wednesday night, that's probably not the best case of student athletes.
Sean, one quick question for you here, and it's just a thought that I had. I played back in the day where we actually had conferences instead of districts. It was great. You played the same teams every year. You developed a rivalries. You had your power programs that were good every year. Do you think instead of rearranging the districts every year, should the state go to something where you guys play the same teams in that district every year instead of every 2 years kind of swapping teams around? I know it's kind of hard probably when you have different teams switching class sizes and stuff like that, but developing the rivalries, because I thought your guys' matchup with Arweva had become a rivalry because how good you guys two were the 2 years you guys were in the district. Now you may not be in the district with them again for a while. You've seen that with Arweva and Kuhn. They were a really good rivalry. Now they're not getting to play each other unless they would possibly line up in a non-district matchup.
No, for our sake, if we're playing trainer every year in football, it's not for us being the smallest school. But as far as making a football conference or football district that stays, somewhat possibly. But the big thing right now that's going out right now is the enrollment piece of are we going to base classes off of enrollment, or are we going to tie in socioeconomic status, recent success, all these factors that people are talking about. The nice thing with districts is typically they don't change a ton. So, like this year we lost our Weeva out of our district, like you mentioned. There's in 2 years they might roll back in. You might lose someone off the edge. We didn't have Exira and Cam for 2 years, and why we weren't playing those guys, would have seemed like a logical rivalry for us.
Right.
So we picked them up in our non-district, not by chance. So that worked out really well. The piece that I want to do to help save that I've been a proponent of, that I've shared with Mr. Tharp of the state, et cetera, of other people, that I think is gaining some traction, is allow 8-man schools to put in for their non-district. Every other class gets to have a choice of who they play non-district. Give us a choice. Give us a choice so we can save some of those rivalries. That way we know, okay, here's the 7 teams in our district. Who's not in our district that we still want to play that would make sense? Who's going to bring a gate as far as, some of those things that, like we're playing Fremont Mills and Remsen St. Mary's. 2 great programs, two good challenges for us, and they'll both bring a gate, which is fine. But there's other schools out there that don't have that luxury. Some random crossovers that don't make a lot of sense that you probably could have pieced together. But the state's trying to make your schedule for you. They're trying to put teams up that may or may not compete. But I think you just give that to the head coaches and the ADs and say, who do we want to play year in and year out? And that would maybe help save that a little bit. Even if they're not in your district, now the way RPI plays out, all 9 games matter, so that the emphasis on that's still going to count.
Sean Burks, head coach with the Audubon Wheelers. We're going to be back with more conversation coming up in just a minute. This is KCIM Sports Rewind, brought to you by St. Anthony Regional Hospital.
As the athletes at your house in the newly renovated sports sports performance facility. If an injury is keeping your athlete out of the game, call St. Anthony Rehabilitation Services at 794-5000 for sports injury and treatment rehab.
It's KCIM Sports Rewind. We're talking a little football here with Audubon head coach Sean Burks. And what goes great with football? A little tailgating. That's what goes on.
Oh.
And, we were talking about this off air a little bit. Carroll Lumber, by the way, has some great Traeger smokers right now. I mean, they are fantastic. I don't know if you guys own a Traeger.
I'm looking outside. I don't see one.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah, you requested the Traeger smoker right
Boys,
outside the window here.
You want
for
a live
Rewind.
read? Go bring me a smoker out here. We'll cook some meat every week. We'll give you a live read. We got video. I'll show you eating.
That's what we need, video of us eating ribs while we're doing Rewind.
You want to
Because
sell
that-
some Traegers? Feed us.
Oh man, yeah. These things are awesome. Wood pellet grills. You know that I've tried the electric smokers. You guys tried
Yep.
those at all?
Yeah.
You guys,
That
do you guys
didn't
smoke
work.
stuff at all? By the way.
I don't, but some of our guys in town do. Monty Rebuff's our primary smoker. He's the resident expert in Audubon.
I was going to say, if you don't smoke, you got to know someone who does.
Yep,
Because that's the
absolutely.
way it rolls. So these things just feed the wood pellets. They keep a constant temperature. They are awesome. Beef, chicken, pork, you name it, they can be smoked. A wide variety of flavors too. Apple, my personal favorite.
You know, a good test would be is if we could do it. Because if us three monkeys could actually cook it, anybody could.
Anybody could. And Traeger's makes it easy. You can pick them up at Carroll Lumber once again, smoking for that great flavor. They're located Wall Lake, Lakeview, Odebolt, and, of course, right here in Carroll. So stop on by Traeger Smokers. You don't get any better in the business than Traeger. Talking with Sean Burks, once again, the head coach for the Audubon Wheelers.
We had a text from our listener, our one listener,
Uh-oh.
Dan Pomeroy. He said he wanted to know why the Clucky twins were so tough.
He knows why the Clucky boys are so tough. That's why he asked the question. It's because they're from Dedham, of course. They're those Dedham boys. They run together. That Dedham crew, and Mr. Pomeroy always gives those guys heck. They are tough. That's for sure.
Sean, before we went to the break, we were talking about, you had mentioned the state allowing 8-man schools to be able to have a choice of who you guys play non-district. What's the reason that they've given you guys over the years that you're the only class size that they don't give that choice to?
The answer has been that there's only so many teams, and they're afraid that those top-end teams will be teams that don't get requested, so they're going to have to stick someone with it. So I think that's kind of what they've been leaning towards is there's no choice to go up or down classes, so they know what 64 teams have to be paired together so they can do it, so to speak, and that's where it's been. But it doesn't, like I told them, it takes some work off their plate. Yeah, there's some teams that logically want to play each other. You can start there and then go after that, but I think we're maybe getting there. I don't know if it'll be next year or not, but I hope so.
But with the RPI, I mean, somebody like you guys playing at Fremont Tabor Mills, it really doesn't hurt you as bad as long as as long as you're playing a team that does well the rest of the year.
If we would have played somebody else, I think we could probably get in the playoffs at 7-2, though.
Yep.
When you start off the year with that loss and then we lose one in district play, you have no room for error after that. So it can be, help you absolutely. But at the same time, the losses rack up in a hurry. You're in trouble, and any loss counts with the RPI. So, to me, it's one of those things where you're playing. Coaches have kind of figured out the system a little bit. It helps to play one pretty darn good team and one average team, so to speak. You don't want to try to schedule a team that's going to go 0-9. But even if you lose to one of them, if you go 1-1, you'll be okay, like you said. But yeah, us having Remsen and Fremont, like last year we went 1-1 in that stretch, and then we ended up going 5-2 in district, but 6-3 wasn't good enough, so it's tough.
And you guys don't have the wild card like the other ones have, so I forgot about that. So you can't be the third place team, but still had a really tough district and get in.
You can. The 8-man RPI now, they just take the district champs, and the next 8 best teams. So
Right.
it could be 2 teams from a district. Our district only got 1 in last year because we had several teams that were 6-3 because we all kind of beat up on each other. We played tough non-districts. It was tough. If you look at BC Moore and some of those rankings and power rankings, our district was ranked the toughest. We were sitting, I think when the playoffs started, we were like 5th or 6th in the power rankings, and we weren't one of the 16 to get in. So it's not a perfect system, but hopefully we'll keep making some progress there.
Is the BC Moore rankings or something similar to that a way to counter that, what you were just talking about, and the fact that you guys beat each other up because of how good that district was? You were only able to get 1 in when you deserved more than 1.
Yeah, there's definitely some things that need to go into it. RPI, as far as the big thing it's missing is your point differential. Right now, a loss by 1 and a loss by 60 count the same. and that's tough. We lost by 6 or 4, whatever it was. We lost by less than a touchdown at Exira, less than a touchdown at Anita against Exira EHK and CAM. Those 2 games were a combined 10 points, and they're weighted like we lost them by a combined 100 points. And Fremont Mills, we lost by 18 late. But it's one of those things where we knew no matter if we lose, you lose. So we went for it on 4th down on our own 15, where late, if point differential played into it, we might not have done that. So, we lost our 3 games by less than 30 points against 3 teams that were really, really good. 2 of them were district champions. 1 of them went to the Dome. Yeah, the tough schedule, I think, like you said, if there's some sort of point differential method tied in there, it would really help.
Tell you what, we got to talk about the team this year. We've been talking about everything else but what you guys are going to do this year. We're going to step aside, take one more break. Back with Sean Burks, once again the head coach of the Audubon Wheelers, next.
As the athletes at your house prepare for hard work and fun. 5,000 for sports injury and treatment rehab.
KCIM Sports Rewind. It's John Ryan, Jeff Blankman, sports director, Jeff Honnold as well, and Sean Burks, the head coach of the Audubon football Wheelers. Practice been going on a little bit. First of all, starting the off season. I mean, that's when the season is really made. How's it been for you guys down at Audubon?
We had a really good group that's really committed. I think to us the off season really starts in March. When basketball and wrestling wrap up, because spring sports, our guys are going a variety of directions, but our weight room really ratchets up in the spring, and then it carries into summer. But at the same time, those guys are still in season of other sports. We want our guys competing. We encourage multi-sport athletes. There was some progress in track this year. A lot of our guys, even some of those guys that maybe don't make the headlines as far as gold medals and first place and qualifying for state track. Just watching, like when I'm helping set up for a track meet, on the day before a practice or day before a meet when they're still practicing, and you go watch some of those kids that normally, don't catch your attention on the meet night that are working their butts off at track practice. That really pays off. That some of that behind the scenes stuff, and then carried into summer. We've added a 4th morning of lifting this year. In the past, we've just done 3. We did 4 this year with a little running and agilities and some team competitions on mornings afterwards. Voluntary, but the guys have really stepped up and chose to come in as much as they can around their work and family lives and vacations and baseball and everything else. So our kids are really, really busy. We really try to respect that, and we really appreciate how many of those guys were able to step up and come in the off season, because it really gets that ball rolling. So when August hits, we can hit the ground running.
Sean, you mentioned you want your guys to be multi-sport, but you also want them into the weight room and doing those things. How do you guys, as a coaching staff down there, work with each other so well that you can get everybody involved in everything and allow the school and the team that's in season to be able to still be the dominant team?
Well, that's just a school policy that whatever's in season trumps whatever. But I think the big thing is the boys coaches have spent some time getting together, developing a weight program, what we want our kids doing for all sports. They're not lifting super basketball specific, strange, odd workout lifts or anything during basketball, and then they're expected to do something else during football. For the most part, we're doing things to build athletes, build movement, build strength, keep the kids moving. And, so the nice thing when you come to if you would come to the weight room at 6:30 on a random Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday morning from all of June and all of July, you'll see representatives there from pretty much every sport for our boys. I'm there for the football. Coach Conkler's there for football. Coach Christensen's there for football, wrestling, and Coach Molinix is there for basketball, and then Coach Wilder has been coming in for baseball. So when you have 4 or 5 coaches there that represent not every sport, but every season, that are all buying in together, they're getting the same message from our athletes. They're held accountable by all of for a lot of our coaches. And they're on the same page that they know that that's expected. They can't play the football coach against the basketball coach or any of that, and it's that message all year long. When basketball hits, Coach Molinix will have the lead, and it'll be the same thing where we'll still be in there at different times watching our athletes that aren't basketball players that are in there in the winter, but it'll still be pretty much the same program. It might just be ratcheted up for off-season kids. So the communication, the buy-in from all of our coaches that are there, and just the kids see that, the kids know that, and I think it's been really good for us.
Getting a constant message is important, but you need those kids in the weight room leading the way. Most of all, telling the younger kids this is how it's done. Coach is going to say we need to be here, but I'm going to make sure you're doing these weights and these workouts.
Yeah, we've got some really good leaders. Luke Mazinski, Skylar Schultes, Marcus Olson. We're three guys that are going to be seniors that really stepped up, as well as a couple of juniors, Ethan Clucky and Joel Clucky. Those 5 guys, we gave them some guys to keep track of as far as attendance goes. Try to stay on some guys in case they started falling off the wagon a little bit. But leading by example is a big thing. They can't tell guys to start showing up to lift, or hey, you've been late, or hey, you're not pushing enough weight if they're not doing it themselves. So that servant leadership, that selflessness and just being that dedicated themselves to be on time, be leaders, and it goes right on down the list. There's other groups of kids that have done it. I think the big thing for us is our junior high kids see that. They know it coming in. They're coming in the mornings in the winter, and then when they hit with us in the spring, they kind of start sliding into being high school kids, and so the ball's rolling a little bit, and the big part of that is our leadership.
It builds the culture.
Do the seniors go down and help with the junior high kids as well? Sometimes they can be intimidated, but boy, if you can get that buy-in there, that really brings it on through.
So what we've done is early on when kids start lifting, we show them, our older kids show them the lifts. And then in season, our weight room is just not big enough for as many kids as we have, which is a great problem right now. So what we've had is our high school kids will come in early, like 6:30 during the school year. J high kids will come in about 7. So as the high school kids are finishing, they'll still see some of that, which we kind of like the overlap. And as they're warming up, stretching out, they see, oh my gosh, look how much weight is on the bar. Look how well this kid moves. Look how hard they're working. Look how much they're sweating. So it's not always direct communication. It's not always that, but just being around them helps a little bit. So, Mr. Dvorak, Steve Dvorak comes in 2 mornings or 3 mornings a week all year long with those junior high kids, and then us coaches are there as well. So we've got a lot of buy-in from our young kids and our young programs that really helps get that fed in there.
Coach, I want to give a quick shout-out to Mr. Dvorak. He does a great job with your guys' youth programs down there. Part of the reason the success is because of how long I think Kim Subert's been a part of that as well over the years. Sean, we brought you to talk a little football. Let's talk a little 8-man this year. What's the state look like in 8-man football? Who do you feel like are the teams to beat this year?
As far as the state goes, I mean, it's tough because we're really focused on our schedule. As far as the state picture goes, anybody that made the Dome last year, you always are concerned with. Your Don Boscos, you go right on down that list of teams. But for us, it starts with our schedule because we can't worry about playoffs if we don't go. To me, it's an 8-win minimum to get in because we found out last year 6-3 doesn't cut it. With 10 games, you kind of bump that up. So we think 8-2 has got to be the minimum to get in. So just to be safe, and you control your destiny. That's the beauty of it. So it starts week 0, and I don't know what the power rankings, what the RPI, what all those things are going to say, but I would put our schedule up there with anybody this year. East Mills was a 7-2 team last year. Fremont Mills was a Dome team last year. Remsen St. Mary didn't have a senior on the team and was nearly in the playoffs in a really tough district with Newell Fonda and Arweva. And then we start district play. Exire HK, Cam, Coon Rapids, Glidden. Oh my gosh, Woodbine will be loaded again this year. So there's a lot of really good teams in our area, and we've got to take care of business week in, week out because we found out that 6-3 is pretty darn good, but it's not good enough. So we know that we've got to raise that bar a little bit this year to make sure and take care of business.
And, Sean, I know that you're one of those coaches that as the season goes on, though, you put together a little map. You got your little pins that you're sticking in there. How much work and effort and homework do you do on that?
More than my wife would like, probably. It's one of those where you don't do it too early, but as you get to the middle, latter part of the season when you can start maybe eliminating some teams or start pigeonholing what districts are going to have so on and so forth. But it's one of those where you try to do it just to kind of have an idea, but it doesn't. We don't share that with the kids. I don't even really share that with my assistants too much. It's kind of just for me in the back of my mind, because the way with Huddle Film Share is you can pull anybody's film any week,
right,
but you only have so much storage. You got to be selective of whose film are we going to start pulling, so later in the year if we want it we can have it. So it's tough for me as far as that plan of who we're going to start pulling. So early in the year, you start pulling several teams from around you that that they've started 3-0. Maybe we'll pull their week 4 film. Then later in the year, you find out a team dropped 3 in a row, and then all of a sudden you can delete their film. And it's a game we have to play a little bit, but the chance of me guessing right is usually pretty slim. So I probably should stop wasting my time.
Yeah, you know you're a high school coach when date night with your wife is actually game film.
Well, I tell you what, don't quit doing it. I enjoy the text messages with all the potential matchups. So.
Yeah, last fall I spent quite a few Saturdays in Iowa City. So, my dad loves driving. He's one of those guys that enjoys that. So I could sit in the back seat on Saturday mornings on the way to Iowa City for 3 hours, and on the evening on the way back. So it's something to do in the car. This fall with my wife expecting late November, and maybe she doesn't want to hear this part, but Iowa's home schedule's pretty bad this year too. There won't be as many trips to Iowa City, and then as well as being AD with home JV volleyball and things like that. There's going to be some more weekends at home. So.
Does that mean we don't have to worry about listening to you driving down the road when we interview on the scoreboard show?
Not as much. It'll typically be I'll typically be in Audubon on Friday nights this fall. Even when we go to Iowa City, and one of them that we're planning on doing is like a night game, so we can take off the next morning. So, it'll be a fun fall. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys again this fall. This is always fun. I appreciate you guys doing the scoreboard show.
Yeah, about a week and a half, it's going to get really real here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, school's going to hit, football season's going to hit, and volleyball's going to hit, cross country's going to hit, and we're all back in that swing of things. We got to enjoy our time while we can as teachers here. It's our last hoorah to go golfing today, like I mentioned, and then it's with meetings. We got our first teacher meeting is this Thursday. Most people get started back either late this week or early next week, and fall sports are exciting. It's a fun way to kind of feel that vibe in the school on football Fridays, and even on volleyball and cross country meets with so much going on in the school. There's that school pride. It's fun to be back. There's a lot of years. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, we got to get back to school, or kind of that mindset. But this year it's really I'm really excited. There a lot of our kids have been doing a lot of fun stuff this summer. We're putting that work in. It's time to go see it pay off.
Yeah, it's that new group of seniors, that new group, that new team on the field. It's always fun.
I hope you can get Dave under par somehow today.
It depends on how we group up. If I'm with Dave, I'm going to hope he shoots low. If we're playing our own ball, I'm in trouble.
Well,
So
he
we'll
said
see how it
retirement
works.
doesn't start until next week when you guys actually go back to school. He's still on summer break. So.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. Randy Speece is retired. And Dave Burks is retired. Two guys that I see quite a bit in my lives, and they've kind of I've talked to both of them, and they don't really get it yet. But like Randy said, he's going to be sitting in his lawn chair in his front yard that first day of school, waving as we all drive by. So, that's when it'll sink in for some of us.
All right, that is KCIM Sports Rewind. Again, our thanks to Sean Burks, head football coach for the Audubon Wheelers, for joining us this week.
When you need to know, KCIM